Chapter 5 Brainwashed into Another Language. The words of Cameron Wolver, my first child. My dad was diagnosed with cerebellar ataxia in 2003. I was 11 years old at that time of his diagnosis, and I had no idea what a cerebellum was, for my interest in learning about the human mind would not come for another decade. All I knew was, judging by my parents' reactions to this diagnosis, life for my dad would never be the same. And now, Chapter 5. There was a time when I not only desired to learn a second language, but I also thought myself capable of success in that respect. That was the reason why I so boldly and confidently added the beginning German course to my class schedule my sophomore year of college. Along that same vein, it seemed that a vast number of things in my life moved. My desire to learn a different language did not mesh up very well with my actual linguistic abilities. Looking back on my efforts to speak something besides English brings to mind someone who was determined to combine oil and water together, stirring them into a very cohesive mixture. To suggest, however, that my efforts while I was in school can be described in any way as being determined, well, that may be stretching the truth just a little bit, because the reality was that having a sustainable drive to stick it out through tough times was pretty much the root of my problem. I lacked the sufficient drive to get things done. As soon as something presented any difficulty, I would begin a furious round of backpedaling. The thing was that a lot of obstacles facing me were self-inflicted, like I was purposely setting myself up. For example, the language class that I had added to my class schedule was at 8 a.m. 8 a.m.! Quite frankly, I seriously struggled every time early in the morning to speak anything that even resembled the English language. Forget about any other languages. Even with a pretty decent command of slang and a pretty good handle on the proper uses of some pretty downright bad English, I struggled. I was not by any definition what you would refer to as a morning person. In fact, the only way to keep me from demonstrating a very serious and habitual abuse upon the snooze button on the alarm clock was to put the offending digital squawk box out of my easy reach. And so, thinking that this was a plan of complete genius, I turned the alarm on full blast and I set it on the shelf across from my bed. The music would come on at the maximum volume, and to shut the radio alarm off, I would have to get out of bed. Well, since I slept on the top bunk, it would be deemed as way too much of a chore to climb back up into bed at this point, and so I would resign myself to being up for the day. And to do it this way seemed like a really sound theory. Having the clock across the room appeared to make perfect sense. At least it did to PM Guy, who had hatched the whole plan and set the whole thing up. But not so much for Early Morning Guy, who in a sleepy and frantic state forgot that he was on the top bunk when he shot out of bed to put a panic stop to the loud music, which had so eloquently barged into his dreams. The act of a full body, early morning plummet onto the hardwood floor was pretty sufficient to wake me up. The explosive early morning activity also served pretty well as a way to wake up my roommate and the friendly residents of the room directly below ours, although I don't remember them being quite as pleasant after this event. Well, as bone-jarring as it was, however, I was a pretty quick study, and I only required another 4 or 5 early morning meetings on the cold and unforgiving floor until I was able to first wake up and remember that I was on the top bunk, and then climb down to the floor level and continue to the task of gently embracing the offending alarm clock. College was my first and my last stint at trying to become a bilingual man. That is until SCA moved in and taught me a more new form of communication called slurring. The language of this kind is unique, and it possesses the ability to become a subset of any dialect, and it can be smoothly integrated into in every nationality. However, before I go any further, I would like to make it clear that in no uncertain terms or in any way did I ever volunteer or elect to learn this language. It was thrust upon me. I have been brainwashed. I will have to say, though, that I have become rather proficient at it. I can speak it, I can understand others who speak it, I can write it, and even on occasion translate it for those poor souls who are of the single lingual persuasion. The only thing that stands out in the way of becoming versed in this form of communication completely is the ability to read it. My writing has become mostly unreadable, even to me. The efforts needed to read my attempts at legible penmanship have become an exercise that is based solely upon my memory of what I was even writing down in the first place. Well, what I mean is that if a note to myself has been jotted down within, say, the preceding 2 or 3 hours, then I have no idea what it means. Indeed, it feels as if I'm trying to decipher ancient hieroglyphs. I mean, what is that? A picture? What could I possibly be trying to tell myself? Did someone fall into a well and needs my help? Anyway, I keep a pad of paper beside our computer for the purpose of taking quick little notes. Most of the time, the top page will be filled up with something that resembles a madman's scratches that just might pertain to his quantum theories of nothingness. My wife, Melissa, will ask me sometimes while she is straightening up if a full page of my scribbles is something important, and do I want to keep it? Well, maybe it is something important, but apparently I don't have a need to hang on to it because I no longer can even read it or process the linguistic skills needed to make it out clearly. I do think, though, that it would be a step in a positive direction if slurring would be recognized as an official language. I would also like to suggest that this form of language be assigned a new name. In this type of dialect, we could have a name that might put an emphasis on the flowing nature of slurred speech. I would like to suggest that it be called cursive speech. I have 2 reasons for proposing this name change. The first one is precisely what I suggest. Cursive speech would be a name that would emphasize and capture the romantic flow in which words are connected within this dialect. The second reason has to do with the direct availability of the cursive name. There once was a time when cursive writing made up a pretty significant percentage of the written word. Everyone was taught in grade school how to write it. The alphabet was the same, but there was a more artistic elegance in the way it was approached. Letters were connected in sweeping arcs to make words, and cursive writing was viewed to be a more mature and a professional form of writing. Well, those days are gone now, and in fact, cursive and writing are no longer even associated with one another. Writing, which is now an area of my interest here, has taken on other forms. Cursive, however, which is my area of interest, has been stuck up on a very high shelf and is just gathering dust, to nearly be forgotten to a larger degree every day. cursive can still be a productive member of our society. And so I am proposing that it would be taken down, dusted off, and reinstated to the area of speech. I feel that the term cursive speech brings a little more class and dignity to those who speak the Ataxian dialect, more so than does continually referring to the language as slurred speech. This is how I will be defining my speech from now on, so who's with me? Calligraphy is another form of writing, but unfortunately it is still being used at the present, because my sloppy Ataxian-based handwriting could and would also benefit from a simple name change. Instead of people scratching their heads when they observe my attempts at legible scribbles, I can explain that I am just practicing my Ataxian calligraphy. I think that it would be a positive thing to do. And now, just like I proposed that cursive be reassigned, I am patiently waiting on writing to be done with the art of calligraphy, so that I can petition that ataxia writing may someday also enjoy the benefits of being given a new designation.